Well, welcome, ladies, to another You Lead webinar. And today I'm super excited that um, we're going to be talking about girls ministry. And so, no matter how this looks for you, we all want to connect to younger generations, and we all want to know, what is this next generation like? What are the things that they're facing, and how can we best, minister to them during this time? So, I'm super excited that you have joined us. I wanted to let you know first up that Amanda Mahias, who is with our student team there at Lifeway, she came down with the stomach bug this morning. And so I'm super sad that she is not going to be with us today. But we still have Catherine and Whitley with us, and they're going to give you a lot of insight. And before I introduce them, I want to just mention a couple of quick things. First of all, we have our new Advent study from Lifeway. So if you're getting ready for the holidays and you are looking for a great Advent study, and I'm telling you, like, this is meaty. Like, I've been going through it myself already, and there's a lot of great entries in here. So you're going to want to pick one of those up at lifeway.com. And then also our Women's Leadership Forum is coming up November 12th and 13th. And so what we're offering right now is our virtual forum, because we're trying to keep the live event really small. But you can do this from anywhere, and you have up to a year once you purchase it to watch any of the sessions. And so it's really going to be a great opportunity for you to get some leadership training right then, because you can watch the live stream, or you can go back, you can listen to breakouts. So you've got a year for that. And so go to lifeway.com/women's forum. You want to sign up pretty soon, because we have a limited number of VIP boxes. And if you sign up, you'll get mailed. And you want the box before forum, because it's got our printed program. In fact, I'll give you all just a sneak peek at the printed program. So it's like, this alone is like a resource. I mean, you get all these handouts and all this great stuff. So we want you to come to Women's Forum, even if it's a virtual event this year. And we're excited about that. Excited to see so many women join us. In fact, Catherine, I think there were like 39 states yesterday or something like that have already signed up. So that's a lot of people that we're looking forward to seeing on, even though we may not be able to see you face to face. Just know that we are hoping that we can see you over the screens. Okay, so we're going to jump in here. We're going to talk about this. I also want to just mention that there is a Q&A section at the bottom. There's also a chat section. So go make sure that your chat is open. Michelle Hicks is going to be monitoring the chat section. So let us know your name, where you're from. We'd love to see that, just so we know who's here with us for the next hour. And then let me introduce to you. First of all, I'll introduce Whitley Lent. Whitley, I'm so used to saying Whitley Tracy, but
I know.
Whitley is married now. And so I have known Whitley for several years, and so thrilled. So Whitley, tell us a little bit about yourself and just what you do there in Oklahoma.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. Like she said, my name is Whitley Lent, and I am a girls minister at Trinity Baptist Church in Ada, Oklahoma. I've been on staff there for 8 years, and just love everything about girls ministry. I recently got married in year 2020, and we got married in February, right before the world shut down. And so my husband Clay and I just are super excited. We're expecting a new baby due in April, and so that's just kind of the big news kind of here in our lives. So
That's so fun. And just, I mean, you got married in February, and then the world changed a few weeks later. So
yeah.
I'm so glad you were able to get that in. And hopefully when the baby comes next April, like, maybe things will be a little more normal. We're not sure. Can anyone say what normal is going to look like from
Right.
this point on, for sure? And then a lot of you know Catherine Inman, because Catherine is on part of our staff. And Catherine is our event project coordinator for all of our women's training events and leadership events. But what you may not know about Catherine is she has been in girls ministry for a long time, and her husband is a student pastor. So I'm not going to take away too much more, but Catherine, jump in there and tell us a little bit more about you and maybe some of your experience there.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. First off, I'm super excited about this opportunity to share about girls' ministry, passionate about it. And I do get to serve with Kelly at LifeWay as an event project coordinator. Prior to LifeWay, I served as a girls intern and girls director at various churches, ministering to fourth grade girls through college age girls. And now, though I don't get to serve in full time ministry, my husband is a student pastor in Franklin, Tennessee. And so I get to serve in student ministry, although it looks a little different than it did previously. And I get to work with our small group girls and disciple girls and take on that new role.
Yeah, so you're definitely still right in the middle of girls ministry. And I also know Michelle, who's with us, and I'm with us too. Like Michelle has three girls, so she has walked through girls ministry in her home. I have a young adult daughter, so I've kind of walked this, but I've also, I mean, my beginnings of ministry was in student ministry. And so I hear that from a lot of women that that's a big part of them. So what we want to know now is we want to know a little bit about you and how you serve. So I'm going to launch a poll real quickly, and we want to see where you serve. So you can go on and you can vote and kind of tell us where you are. What is your role in girls ministry? So I'm going to launch this poll and click on that. You might just be a mom, a volunteer. You might be a girls ministry staff, whether that's paid or volunteer, women's ministry leader, small group leader, student pastor's wife, or maybe something else. So let us know real quickly, and we'll see what we kind of come up with here. It's always fun to do these kind of polls. We love this part of the webinars. And some of you may say, well, I'm kind of more than one, but that's okay. Which one would you probably identify the most with right now? All right. I'm seeing you guys voting. Okay. If you haven't had a chance, I'm going to end the poll real quickly and we'll see what our results are. So the results, I'm going to share it with you guys. It looks like that we have about 30, it's tied with volunteer and other. So that's interesting. So what, I don't know what the other is. So feel free to put that in our chat section. That'd be fun to find out. And then 30% of you are women's ministry leaders. So thank you, thank you, thank you for jumping on with us today. And small group leaders, things like that. 12% of you are student pastors' wives, which that's huge. So I'm glad to know that. And then 24% of you are just you're a mom. And I think that's really important for us to recognize that if you're a mom, you are doing girls ministry. Meaning that's really really important. So thank you for participating in that. I'll kind of close out our poll for real quickly now. But also, I want us to talk a little bit. We're going to start the conversation with just really what is girls' ministry? What is it? And why is it important? So, and what is maybe the goal of girls' ministry? So, Whitley, I'm going to let you start. And then, Catherine, you feel free to jump in too.
Sure. Um, so I like to say that girls' ministry is simply ministry to little women. I know that if you're a women's ministry leader, you may be kind of thinking, how in the world do I relate to those foreign people? They teenagers are sometimes kind of aliens to us a little bit, but we're all female, and so we all really struggle with the same things. We need the same encouragement. The difference just looks a little different. And so these girls are the future of your women's ministry, and that's how we should view them. Girls ministry is not immature. I think we get a bad rap sometimes, and maybe that comes from the men thinking that girls ministry, oh, it's just a big sleepover. They just giggle all the time, and but it really is not. These girls are students, and they're students who need teachers, and women of God who will walk beside them, who will just show them what it means to and what it looks like to be a godly woman and to live their life just walking beside the Lord and seeking and pursuing the Lord. And so that's where you as older women, whether you're in women's ministry or girls ministry leader, come in, is that we need these older women to be pouring into the younger girls. A goal, this is a pretty simple goal. I mean, we could get really into the details, but I just like to say the goal of girls ministry is for girls to become devoted followers of Christ. And then through that they are sharing the good news with others. And so just kind of, I mean, we could really, again, go into lots of great detail and make that a really big paragraph of the goal of girls ministry. But when it comes down to it, that's kind of the bottom line.
Yeah, I think that's really good. Catherine, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think that's awesome, Whitley. And I think that I like to say that too, that it's just bigger girls, it's little women. It's what we were when we were younger. And I think sometimes it's easy for us to forget that because we do look at them walking around church giggling and laughing, and we're just like, they're so immature. But in reality, they have souls too, and we were there, and it's easy for us to forget that. And I do think it's important to include discipleship and the Bible study, teaching them what missions look like, to teach them to have a heart for the world, because God has a heart for the world, and that's so important. And then also just leadership equipment, starting young, starting with them when they're in middle school. A lot of times we think that they're not capable of leadership in middle school, but it's because we've never poured into them. And so we can start doing that when they're in middle school. And then also, like, I mean, planning events. Events are fun, and there is purpose behind events. And so I think it's looking at, okay, what do my girls need right now in the season they're in? And what can I do in an event to help them and guide them in what they're struggling with? Maybe it's friendships, for example. So have a fun event where they get to know each other, they get to build community with one another within their church, and then they they get to learn what true biblical friendship looks like. And then also, I think if you are in girls ministry, if you're a girls ministry leader, ministering to moms and ministering to the women leaders that are in your student ministry is so important, because we're all in this together. We all need encouragement. We're getting those texts from moms or from, women leaders who are having difficult conversations, and so we get to come alongside them and point them to scripture and give them resources to help them on this journey. And with that being said, girls ministry isn't necessarily about a staff person. And I know some of you might not have a large girls ministry, or you might not have a girls director at your church. It's more about just directing time and attention to the girls in your ministry, whatever that might look like. And so those are just a few of the things I think girls ministry can include. But we could go on and on. There is a ton of other things that we could talk about, and we are going to hit on some of that later on today.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned several of the things that you did as far as like what it includes, because it really is, it is kind of like women's ministry in a way. Like we really see that it is including discipleship. It is being intentional. There is an intentionality of how do we help women have, these young women have a heart for the world and missions and evangelism. And yet, community, building that community. It's such a formative time for these girls. And so if they can find those really good connections at church, I think that's super helpful. And I think sometimes too, like we tend to think of generations. So we have talked a lot about millennials in the last 10 years, but our millennials are really not where our teenagers are. And so this is really kind of that Generation Z. So I want us to just take a few minutes to talk about what are the differences in this generation? What are we seeing? What are some of the concerns, things like that? And then we're going to talk about issues in a minute. But Whitley, tell us a little bit about just some of the things that you've learned about this particular generation.
Yeah. So I'm just going to kind of give us like a little Gen Z snapshot, okay, if you will. Gen Z, or they're also not known as iGen, our students are the generation who were born after the year 1996. Okay. So, and there's kind of some wiggle room there, but the statisticians are saying, okay, 1996 is kind of where we're landing. They are the most culturally diverse generation in history, and they are on track to be the best educated generation. They are digital. These students that are in our ministry now have not known life without like the iPad, where they could like scroll. They just haven't known life without the internet. They swiped an iPad before they could talk. They are very entrepreneurial. They have seen how easy and simple it is to just start up a business. I mean, they've seen like businesses like Uber and Uber Eats. I mean, like Airbnb. I mean, these things just popped up and used the internet and a lot of just self promotion, in the beginning. And they've seen how that is like very successful. And so they are constantly thinking about more than any other generation, just how they can be their own boss and how they can kind of start their own business. Trade schools and vodtechs are becoming more popular. They've seen different from the millennial generation who feel like they all needed to go to college and get a degree to get a job. They've seen maybe older siblings or cousins or just maybe even their parents do that, but then not maybe be doing what they want to do, or they don't have a job. And so they are kind of seeking other opportunities, other directions and tracks. In a religious and a godly standpoint, here's a couple of just statistics. The 30% of Gen Zers say that religion is important to them. So that's if this is true, that makes them the least religious generation in U.S. history. So only 30% say that religion matters to them. 85% of them say that living a self-fulfilled life is very important. This is the threshold to cross as the church. Living a self-fulfilled life comes from something outside of ourselves, which is Jesus, right? So the exciting part of this, that they're seeking this, I need to be fulfilled, is that we know what fulfills us, and that's Jesus. And so that's kind of our gateway. And I'm going to give a lot more kind of some statistics when it comes to Gen Z and depression, anxiety, and social media, and how phones and the internet and all of that is affecting this generation later kind of on, when we are kind of talking more about just kind of the negative, I guess, aspects of just what's affecting this generation. But that is just kind of like a snapshot of maybe some ways that they're differing from the millennial generation.
That's really interesting. And I think too, like we want to do another poll real fast because we know that there's some different issues that younger girls are facing. We know that the list that we put together is not extensive. And so we're just going to do a snapshot of some things that maybe, so that we can kind of go, a little bit into what are we seeing with the girls that you're dealing with, because we have people. I noticed there's someone that's even with us from I think I saw that they were from Ireland. So I'm glad you're with us. And so let's launch the second poll, because we'd like to see just maybe what are some of the issues that you're finding. I'm going to go to this again. Let's see if I can go to poll number 2. I'm going to launch the poll, and we just put maybe what is the number one issue that teen girls are facing in your ministry. We put insecurity, maybe identity issues, gender identity, because or gender issues, and if that's a issue, anxiety, loneliness, social media, and if none of those really seem to fit what you think is a top need for your girls, then put other as well. Yeah, it's interesting seeing what you guys are putting. Some of it's not too surprising, but this is really good. But it's so helpful for us to kind of know that as well. Okay, I am going to end the poll real quickly, and then I'm going to share our results. And this may not be a surprise to a lot of you, but most of you said, almost 70% of you said anxiety, and that is, we see that all the time, even in women right now. That is probably one of the top issues that women are facing it looks like social media, and we're going to talk a lot about social media here in a few minutes about that one. And I think loneliness and anxiety can go kind of a little bit together. Insecurity still up there as well. So that is, those are interesting statistics for us just to know what you're dealing with so that we can talk a little bit about it. So, Whitley and Catherine, let's talk a little bit about, Catherine, why don't you start first? What are some of the issues that you're seeing with the girls that you're ministering to?
I think that depression, anxiety, a lot of things that were mentioned, body image, those are the huge things right now. And I think living in a pandemic has not helped those things. It's only escalated it because they don't know how to deal with those things. They don't know where to take them. Um, they don't know how to name it, which is huge. I think they don't know how to communicate that that's what's going on. And some of it is they might be sad and lonely, and when they were sad and lonely 10 years ago, they would say, "Hey, I'm sad because this happened." But now the language has changed and they're coming to us saying, "Hey, I'm depressed and I want to take my life." And it's just escalated completely because they're not sure how to name those emotions, those feelings that are going on. And a lot of that ties back into social media, ties back into what the world is feeding them, telling them like this is how you feel. And we know that feelings are real, but they're not true. And that we should take those emotions, those feelings to the word because we can filter that through truth and then know, okay, this is what I do with these feelings. But a lot of them are not able to do that because of how they're communicating based on like social media and just rather text it or suppress it instead of actually naming it and owning saying this is what's going on. But I would say that anxiety, depression, identity, a lot of that is what I'm seeing in my area. That might be different in other areas. I'd be interested to hear about Whitley to see, because she's in Oklahoma, to see what she would say she's seeing.
Yeah, Whitley, you want to add to that too? Maybe some of the things you're seeing?
Yeah, Kelly. I would say that where I am in Oklahoma, we're more of a rural kind of environment, but we're seeing the same things. I feel like when I was growing up, I grew up in even more of a smaller town here in Oklahoma, and some things just didn't reach us. I mean, I grew up without the internet. I graduated in 2007 from high school, and so the internet was just kind of coming on, and social media was just becoming a thing. But now every place in America is, if you have social media, is being affected the same because they're all being reached by social media, and the same lies. I mean, so Catherine, I would agree. I mean, all of those things: depression, anxiety, self-harm, body image, just an identity crisis. I feel like is it just kind of covers all of the things that my girls are dealing with. I would say that the enemy, he is not a recreator of anything. He uses the same schemes that he did in the garden with Eve, that he does with us today. And it really comes down to, I feel like, discerning what is a lie and what is truth. And that goes into anxiety, that goes into the depression, what thoughts are in my mind, that goes into the lies that girls are believing about what they look like or what people think of them, or whatever. Back in the pandemic, I on my email, I had received an email from Jenny Allen, and there was a resource that she had called the Anxious Thoughts Guide, and it was just a free resource that she put in. I think it's from her book, Get Out of Your Head. And so I just wanted to share these questions with you. If you're interested, I think you can go to her website and probably find this Anxious Thoughts Guide. But it's 4 questions to kind of, if your girls are dealing with anxiety, or really just at the root of trying to figure out what is a lie and what is truth. You, as a mom, as a girls minister, as a youth volunteer, can kind of help your girls kind of walk through discerning what is a lie and what is truth. So the first one is, what is it? Like, we need to name it. Like Catherine had said, like, we need to name what the problem is or what the thought is. And the second one, is it true? Okay. Like, Yes or no? Is it true? Yes or no? The third one is, what does God say about it? So what does God's word say about it? This kind of goes another level into, is it true, right? Can we find this truth in God's word? And then, am I going to believe God? And so that kind of that's the application part of this, is that, okay, I know that it's a lie. I know here's the truth that God's word says about it, but am I going to believe it? And that's where the girl is going to have to make the decision to believe truth over lies. And so, anyways, that just has been something that I've used with my girls, and it's just been a great tool to kind of help them process. Because, like Catherine said, I mean, I think everyone is struggling with just what is happening right now in the world, and how are we coping, and what do we believe or not believe, and all of those things. And so this is just a great tool just to kind of be able to help us guide these girls who, sometimes their brains aren't fully developed, and so we're just needing we're not licensed counselors by any means, but we can kind of guide them just to seeking truth.
I also want to mention, because anxiety, as it's coming up, we have two new resources coming out from Lifeway next year on this. I mean, one of them will be for women and one for teen girls, and it's actually just called Anxiety, and it's by Scarlett Hiltibidal, and so it'll be coming out probably in the summer of next year or later next year. So be on the lookout for those. So it'll have a women's study and a companion guide for teen girls. So they're both written by Scarlett, and I think that might be a helpful resource for a lot of our leaders, whether whether you're ministering to women or to teen girls. So that would be good too. Now there's been a lot. I want to talk. Let's dig in a little more on social media, because there's been a lot of discussion on. There's a Netflix documentary called The Social Dilemma, and you see a family with teens, and you see this kind of effect of social media. So let's talk about some of the challenges in our current culture. And I don't think the pandemic has helped, because it's really given teens more time to even spend maybe on social media. So maybe y'all, like Catherine, talk about how this affects the social, I can't even say it, socialization with our teen girls, and then just maybe some of the effects that you guys are seeing on this. You want to jump in, Catherine? I'll let you go first.
Sure. So I think first you have to look at how parenting, we talked a little bit about generation. So the Generation Z was raised by Generation X. And so a lot of times when you look at different generations, they're going to do the opposite of how their parents raised them. And so the parents are more hands off, free range parenting. But in doing that, it's ripped away their childhood, because they're forced to grow up more, to have opinions on certain things. I went to lunch with a few girls who are 16 last Sunday, and we were talking about issues in the world and how they were responding to it and what they thought. And they were like, our childhood's been taken away from us, Catherine. Like, we have to know what we believe and why we believe it. And we're just 16. And I was like, man, I am in my 20s and I still don't know what I believe. And I'm still searching for truth on different things that the world's going through right now. But they're, because of their peers and because they literally have the world in their pocket through their smartphone, they are expected to know, like, well, this is what's going on in the world. And so you see them having, like what Whitley said, an exposure to technology, and they're not just lost in navigating this world, but they're leaderless as well, because they don't have people pouring into them, teaching them this is how to use wisdom with your social media. And it can be good, and we've seen it used for good, but we know that the enemy takes what is good and uses it for evil, because nothing is new under the sun. And so they had this mass amounts of information with no wisdom. And that's when we get to come in and say, okay, let me point you to wisdom. Those questions are great, Whitley, what you were talking about, but also helping parents know, like, let's put safeguards on our phones. Let's look at their history, what they're looking at. Let's have certain times where they should and shouldn't be on their phone. I'm amazed by a lot of teenagers who will text me like at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, why are you on your phone? But there's a lot of, I think there's things that we can implement, where we can put in place, or that we can help teach those who are parents or leaders, what they should be doing. Not that we have all the answers, but we can help them and guide them in that, because that does play a role in the socialization of teen girls. They're walking in to church, and if they don't see anyone, if they look around, they don't see any of their friends, they pull out their phone, because that's how they cope. That's their new coping mechanism, and they just escape to a different world, and their world's right there. This is where they're placed for a time right now, and they don't want to do that because they don't know how to relate. They don't know how to communicate. It's scary because they have to actually carry on a conversation. I went out with a few girls a couple of weeks ago, and we were at a restaurant, and they couldn't even make eye contact with the server and actually place their order, but they have no problem looking at their phone and hiding behind there and communicating in that way. And so I think you're seeing that affect them in multiple ways, in multiple areas. But with that being said, too, they're not building relationships and community. And that's what we need. We need the body of Christ. We need to go deeper in those relationships with people our own age, but also people older than us and younger than us. And that's not happening because they don't know how to do it. It's completely turned off in their brain, and they don't have the power to do that. And with speaking about the brain, Whitley, that you hit on just a second ago, like their frontal lobe is still developing. And a lot of that is going to play a role in how they interact with others. And so that all ties back into social media and having the world at their fingertips.
I want to, what you've talked about, and even just with girls, just kind of uh, getting to talk to each other. And this really leads into the conversation of the importance of what we do in our ministry in developing relationships, which can happen through discipleship. And so let's talk a little bit about the importance of discipleship, Whitley, and kind of like how, as we're trying to get them, to develop those relationships, because if they can't do this, now, and as they get it on their own, and as they, grow up into the workforce, let's talk about how does discipleship play a big role in girls ministry?
Yeah, Kelly. So in my ministry, I would say discipleship is if not the biggest focus, the second biggest focus that we focus on in our ministry, because we have girls who who come from believing homes, who their parents are believers and who actively pour into their life. But then we also have a big percentage of girls whose parents aren't believers, or maybe they're just checked out and they aren't actively pouring and setting those guidelines and just some healthy barriers and just asking them, what are you learning? Like, monitoring different their friends or their phones, and just pointing them to truth. And so discipleship in girls ministry is huge, not only just for the girl who comes from the believing home, but also for the girl who comes from the non-believing home. So if you have a girl who comes from a believing home, we all know, because we were teenagers once, that we don't always listen to our parents, right? Like, I mean, like time and time again, I will have a mom that will say, okay, I've been telling my girl, my daughter, this same thing, but her discipler said it once, and she came home and said, oh, she told me this. And anyway, it just makes all the difference. We need these, sometimes it takes many voices speaking into our daughter's life for it to click, and so whether that be the believer, the mom who is a believer, that her friends, she has believing friends who are pouring into her daughter, or if it's that she is signed up for discipleship and paired up with an older woman there in the ministry. And then when we look at like the girl who comes from an unbelieving home, or parents who are just kind of checked out, this may be the only positive role model and gospel-centered adult who is speaking into her life. And so that is so important. I know that, man, I meet with a girl who comes from one of these homes, and so it was hard for her to be open with me because she thought I would be disappointed in her at first, but we've moved through that. She's able to be open and honest. And, there's sometimes that I even kind of encourage her. She has to set her own boundaries, and that really should be coming from her parents, but she's just in a situation where it's not. And so that's why Catherine had mentioned a while ago, the body of Christ is so important, that we need each other, and in these situations where maybe we can step in and really point this girl to the Lord, and really help her where maybe her parents are not. And so discipleship is huge. It is key. I even just think about my own life. It made such an impact when I was a new believer, just in how I studied the word. I even grew up in church, and I didn't necessarily know how to study God's word. But I meet still to this day with a lady. She just turned 70, and her name is Charlotte. She's a hip 70. But I even have asked her, I'm like, Charlotte, will you just teach me how to pray? Like, when you pray, it's like you were talking to your best friend, and that's how I want to pray. And so just in my own life, I look at just the difference that discipleship has made. And it's just kind of like there's just the saying that what is exposed to the light cannot hide in the darkness. And so there's that aspect of it as well, the accountability, just the checking in. And so anyways, I feel like I could go on and on, just how discipleship is just so important.
Well, because it's such a huge issue. I'm right. I mean, discipleship, I mean, like, it is a lifelong pursuit. It is not something that you go, okay, well, we've done that, check it off the list. It's, we've attained that. And I love what you said about just having those multiple voices, whether a young woman is from a really great godly family. I mean, I am so grateful for the women that poured into my daughter. And I remember her being in college, and she said, hey, would you be offended if I asked so and so to be my mentor? Like, she had to, and I was like, no, please do. Like, please, because I know this woman and she's amazing, and I would love for you to spend time with her. And so I was really grateful that she got to do that. Okay, this is a question that we get, and we're at kind of the 40-minute mark. So I want to make, sure that I'm watching our time as well. But this question we get sometimes from women, or even girls ministers, or young women that want to see more of girls ministry in their church. And it's the how do you get a student pastor on board, or how do I get my pastor on board? And so both of you come from different perspectives on this. Whitley, you have great support, I know that. And Catherine, you're married to a student pastor, so you've got some insight on that. So Catherine, you want to jump in there and talk about your perspective of how would you get your husband on board with all this? I mean, I know that he is, but if you were trying to advise somebody.
So it's funny because I've actually had this conversation with my husband when we were dating. So I was like, why are some student pastors or pastors scared of girls ministry? Like, I couldn't understand, because I saw all the benefits to having a girls ministry. And as we talked about it and looked at all the different sides, it made a little bit more sense. But I think the biggest thing is, it doesn't necessarily have to be a program. It doesn't have to necessarily be a person that they hire that they have benefits for, or a line item in your budget, which can sometimes, like, their mind's thinking through that because they're trying to be good stewards of what they've been given. But it can be important because they need someone who can help with gender specific ministry. And I think when they realize that okay, I can't have this conversation with this girl because I have no idea what she's walking through. I'm not a girl, and we know the Lord made us different, and our brains are wired different, and just everything. Then they're like, okay, who can I bring into this conversation? Who can talk to this girl? And it could be, I mean, it could be a lay leader. It could be It could be someone that has a heart already for girls ministry, that's already doing things in the church, in your student ministry, that's already hanging out with girls and is a small group leader and volunteering, and just bringing her into that role and letting her guide those conversations. So I think it's important to have them realize, okay, like it's nothing that we necessarily have to add, but it's going to benefit us as a student ministry as a whole, because teen girls matter to God, and they need to know what that looks like from other women. I mean, we see that in Titus, like they need to know what that looks like to learn from older women, part of being that body of Christ. And so, yes, the student pastor is wonderful because they do need to have a male role model. They need to see what it looks like. I mean, I've had girls in my ministry who didn't know what a male figure should look like. And so my husband was able to show them like, hey, this is what it looks like to be a man of God. And but he was also able to have female influences in their life, so he wasn't the only one doing that work, and he was able to equip other women to lead in that way. And so some student pastors' wives love working with teen girls, and that's great. Like I cannot imagine life without working with teen girls. But I have other friends that are pastors' wives, like student pastors' wives, and they don't necessarily feel called to that. They feel called to another area of the church. And I think that's okay as well. And so I think talking to your student pastor or your pastor saying it doesn't have to be your wife, it can be someone else. We can put together a girls ministry team, and you don't have to have that load on your shoulder to bear. Like we can build this, and we can run with it and make sure we filter everything through you, because I think a lot of times they already have so many things on their plate. They're going to meetings for the whole church, and they're having to worry about student ministry as a whole. And so sometimes they just look at it as like, oh well, I just don't want to add this to my plate, like there's just another thing I would have to add. So I think if you bring them a game plan saying, hey, we can relieve that pressure and still pour into the girls in your ministry, so they can have role models, so they can have someone that you would trust that they could go to. But also the question I always go back to, I'm like, what do you have to lose? Like you have nothing to lose if you allow this to happen. Like it's actually going to help your student ministry instead of damage it. And so I have heard different stories, and so I know my husband and like my story is a little different, and I've worked with some amazing student pastors, and they were always for girls ministry. And so I know that there might be some of you who are like, well, that's easy for you to say because you've had really just great leaders that you've worked under. So I think if you do struggle, then let us know. I mean, we can connect you with Amanda, who wasn't here, because that's her heart too, and she would love to help have that conversation. They do something with, it's called ministry care calls or soul care calls that you can sign up for, and she can actually help you. So if you're a volunteer watching and you're like, I want to help get this started, let us know. Like Michelle can drop our email in the chat, and we can help, like get you more resources and help you come up with a girls ministry team and help build out what that could look like. Because there, you might be like, well, that's overwhelming for me, I don't know where to start. So we would be more than happy to help you start, because I mean, it's, you don't really have anything to lose.
Willie, would you want to add anything about like just what has it been like to have, or what has your pastor or your student pastor done that has encouraged you with your girls ministry?
Yeah. So I would say all of those things that Catherine said. The only thing that I would add is just that I see, so I'm girls minister in parentheses, associate youth pastor. And so I work closely, his name is Caleb, and he's actually younger than me, which is kind of funny. But I just see my job as a protection for Caleb, for his family, and for his ministry. And so we just, if there's a girl who needs to talk about something, they just know to come to me. They don't even have to go to him. Even if they do, he can just say, hey, Whitley's right over there, or whatever. He just sends them to me. And so I even asked Caleb one time, I said, how do you see my job like valuable to you? And one of the things he said that it helps him lead better. That he can ask me kind of the girl side of things when he's sermon prepping, when he's doing examples, when we're planning, like I kind of have the girl voice, and something that my pastor and my youth pastor that I work with, I know that I have a seat at the table, and that I don't just have a seat, but I have a voice. And them just listening, it's not that they go with my idea every time, but I very much feel a part of the team. And so that is just something that means is huge for me. It's just that I have a seat at the table, and that I feel valued, and that I know that they know they value girls ministry, and they know that girls mean the world to the Lord. And so they are just as excited when a girl comes to know the Lord as a guy. And when I just love getting to share, like, oh man, I had this conversation with this girl, and just man, she came to know the Lord, or whatever it may be. They are just so excited. And so they are just two of the biggest cheerleaders for my ministry, which is just the coolest thing ever. So that's kind of what I would say.
Yeah, you're definitely blessed that you have that kind of, support in your church, and we just pray that more women would get that kind of support from student pastors or pastors that are men. So we're kind of running out of time here pretty quick, but there's a big question that I think a lot of women who are on this call might want to ask, and that is, how can you kind of marry women's ministry, girls ministry? How can women's ministry come along beside you? Whether that's doing something together, or just, how can they encourage you? So let's talk about maybe some practical ways that women's ministry can come alongside you and support you. So both of you, I want you to both jump in on this, and I'll just leave the whole panel of us up. And I want to remind you that if you do have a question, there is a Q&A section, and Michelle's monitoring that, and we're gonna go to that right after we finish this question.
Catherine, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'll go.
Yeah, go for
So
it.
I do think that is huge to have women's ministry partner with girls ministry. When you look at statistics right now, you're having, the statistics used to be that they were dropping out of student ministry, or around church, dropping out of church around 18. Now that's 16. And so it's looking at that saying, okay, well, when are they coming back? That's my question. When are they coming back to church? And they're not coming back until they're starting families. And women and men are getting married later in life. So you're looking at them coming back in their late 20s, early 30s. So 16 to 30, that's a big gap. And one thing that I was like, okay, when I was in girls ministry, I was like, what could I do? Like, what can we do to try to keep them engaged? And the girls ministry I was in, we would have them until college. Like they would fall under girls ministry until they were in college, and then when they were in young adult, that's when they would go to women's ministry. And so it's, how do you build that bridge then from girls ministry to women's ministry, so that they know women's ministry is there, and that they're going to feel valued and known when they leave girls ministry going into women's ministry. And I think it's difficult because a lot of times when they are young adults, they're looking at women's ministry and they're like, well, that's what my mom did or does. And they're saying, I don't really care about cooking or cleaning or anything, or maybe I'm not a mom yet, or there's just so many different stages. And so they just feel left out of women's ministry. They don't feel like they're connected. And so I think coming alongside girls ministry, building that relationship, letting them know before they even get to women's ministry that women's ministry is available to them, is huge. And we want to champion each other. Women's ministry wants to champion girls ministry, and girls ministry wants to champion women's ministry. And so I think some of the ways that you could come alongside girls ministry is letting them know that you're available, whether that's you serving as a discipleship leader, I could tell you I used to have a list of girls that would come to me and saying, Catherine, I want to be discipled. And I did not have enough people, enough older women to pour into them, which is heartbreaking. And sometimes that's because women don't think they're cool enough or hip enough. And that's just not true. They want, you have Jesus in you and they want that. And so they're wanting to be poured into in that way. And so maybe it is mentoring or discipling someone younger than you, in women's ministry, helping connect that. Maybe it's having like a speed dating event where you let the younger girls come and meet the older women and they get to interact with each other and hang out, and it's just fun and you get to know each other, and then through that discipleship relationships can form. um, or maybe it's just serving as a small group leader on Sunday and saying, hey, like, women's ministry, we need small group leaders in the student ministry world. Your student pastors will love you. Like, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you that, because it's always hard to try to find leaders. And so if you start building that relationship with them on Sundays, that's going to pour into the week, and you're going to get to organically form those relationships with those girls and pour into them in that way. And maybe you put that in like your church bulletin or your Facebook group, or you talk about it with moms or other church members to let them know, like, hey, there's some needs for girls ministry. Like, they need a house for this event, or they need someone to disciple, or maybe as a women's ministry team, if you don't have a girls ministry team, then it's helping come alongside them and teach them what that looks like. I think one of the biggest blessings for me when I was starting out in girls ministry is I got to go and sit on the women's ministry meetings, and I got to hear, okay, this is how they're doing women's ministry. This is how they're writing their Bible studies. This is how they think through their schedule for the year, and how they plan their calendar and how they look at their budget. It was such a huge blessing to me, because I got to learn as a younger leader, okay, this is what they're doing and I can incorporate this in my ministry. And then, I mean, maybe it's just having the girls ministry team and women's ministry team going and having a retreat, getting to know each other too. So you have accountability within the leadership, and that's going to just naturally trickle down, and the girls are going to see that, and they're going to want to know what women's ministry is about when it's that time.
I love that you were just like kind of brought even into some of those meetings, because just to hear and just to be around that as a young leader for yourself, that's really, I think that's a really important part too. Yeah, just training and developing leaders. That's really good. Whitley, how have you kind of seen women's ministry kind of, come along beside you?
Yeah, our women's ministry really just, I mean, they have at different points, different women at different times have just asked me, hey, do you have a need? Like, whether it's I want to financially sponsor a girl to go to camp, or hey, I'm available. I'm kind of a gopher. I had one lady say, hey, I am a gopher. I will do whatever you need me to do. Because we didn't get to go to camp this summer. We kind of hosted ours, there at our church. And so she said, I'll just be the gopher. I'm like, I need a gopher. I didn't know I needed a gopher, but I do. And so she was so helpful in that. I think a big way that women's ministry can partner with girls ministry is just through prayer, just praying for the leaders of the ministry, for the girls. And I have, again, for camp, I have, and this is actually a man, he and his wife won a list of every camper who's going to camp, because they want to pray for them by name specifically for that week. And so anyway, prayer is just a big part. And then I've just seen there is no better way to just really get connected, or to just I don't know, partner together than when you're serving together. So whether that's local missions or if it's international, I mean, right now we're not really flying internationally, but if it's just, I mean, picking up trash, or if it's the local, food pantry, organizing the food, or serving, we have a homeless shelter that serves a meal every night. And so anyway, just the generations partnering together and just serving together. When you're, like, have gloves on and you're in the middle of cleaning up something, like, you're just talking, and man, I think that's really when bonds form, and when the generation gaps really just kind of merge there. So the other thing I was going to say is a few years ago, the girls ministry and the women's ministry, we did a Bible study together. And so LifeWay has really great, every couple of years they put out one for women and then a girls version as well. And really they aren't that much different. Usually the girls is just maybe a little shorter. But we were able to form groups. And so we mixed girls and the older women from the women's ministry, and we had different discussion groups. So they had the homework during the week, and then we would come together, watch the video, and then we did discussion time. And I think that was one of the biggest just builders of community, and kind of really that was where we really launched our discipleship, kind of from, because these ladies came and thought, oh, these girls, I can relate to them more than I thought that I could. And so their confidence just in, okay, I can disciple, I can meet with this girl, kind of flourished from that.
Yeah. And just having multiple women being involved, showing up, being available, I think that's huge. So, even if you're not going to be in a weekly opportunity to maybe be with girls, those special events that your student pastor needs help with, or just show up, tell them that you're willing to just come along beside them and, be there and be available. So those are really good. Michelle, I know we've had a couple questions, so I'm going to let you jump in there. We've got about 5 minutes. So Catherine and Whitley, just try to answer them as briefly as you can.
Okay.
And we'll go from there. So Michelle, tell us the questions.
Great. Okay, Amy had the question of, and to answer this one really fast, let me see how that happens. How do you have a conversation with a girl about a moral failing, especially if the girl is a leader in your youth group, in your student group?
That's a tough question. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I'll jump in here. I think you first commend her for, well, I don't know how it all went down, but if she came to you, then I always try and tells you, confesses whatever just happened. I always try to just first encourage her that I'm proud of her for coming and telling me. Now, if it was the other way around, you probably wouldn't lead, if you found out and you had to approach her. But I think first, just reminding her, just who God is and of his character. And we first want to start off with that. And then second, I think maybe just asking her questions, and just kind of feeling out where the decision maybe was made wrongly, and just kind of seeing how that, we don't want to condemn, right? We want to lift her up, but we also want to make sure, let's look at this process and how did we come to this decision? How did it get this far? And so kind of see where maybe some things in the beginning, some red flags that we didn't really maybe, notice. And then I would just probably end with just looking at, okay, where are we going with, moving forward? I mean, sin has consequences. And so whether that is removing her from the leadership that she's in for a time, period. And then I would also put in place, okay, depending again on whatever it was that had happened, but just some safeguards or accountability, just to set her up for success, going forward. And then I would just end with praying for her. And then obviously you're going to continue, just to check in.
Right.
Oh, you said everything I could think of. Yeah.
And that was very good. Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you for answering that one in a very succinct way.
Oh,
Another question came from Chelsea, just talking about, what are ways to get into the schools actually? How do you get and connect with the girls that way? She said her church is small, but the schools are big. And I know that's going to vary between school to school, county to county, city to city, state to state. But what are some ways, just in ministry in general, that you can reach out to girls and use school as one of those avenues?
So, go ahead. Catherine, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I'll answer really quick so you can answer, Whitley. But where we're at right now in Williamson County, we have a really hard time getting into the schools. So it's even hard to get through in the schools, even if you're part of a FCA, like Fellowship of Christian Athletes. So our method had to change from what we had done previously and other states that we had done ministry in. And one of those methods is really teaching our students to be missionaries at their school, because you're only going to reach so many people. That's their mission field every single day. And so when you pour into your girls, even if it's a small church, when you're pouring into those girls, they're going to have more of an outreach and influence over their peers than you ever could. And so it's really pouring into them, making it easy, giving them resources. One thing that we did was table talk conversation cards. And so we encouraged them to take these little cards that they could take to school with them to create conversation at the lunchtime, at the table that they're having with, just having lunch on a regular Monday afternoon, and take that into them and say, okay, like it was like a silly question, but through that question, they were able to tie into the gospel. And so I think that's one of the biggest things that we've done. And other areas, other states that we've served in, we would, go to the football games, make yourself available, be on campus when it's open and available for you to do that. Go to lunches if you can. Like, we can't even do that where we're located right now. But I think if you can, depending on where you're at, where you're located, if you can just go to homecoming games, go to the football games, have a tent set outside, and have just resources. You can take like subs and Gatorade to the girls soccer team when they're practicing, if you just build those relationships with the coaches. Or maybe you have a lot of girls that are involved with music. We have a lot of girls involved with the band at our church, and so that's going to their shows, or during their practice during the summer, it's just going and taking them different. We would just take them like Gatorade because it was so hot and they'd be practicing. So just finding like little ways like that. But I think the biggest way is just to really teach your girls to have a mission mind, and that it starts right where they're at right now.
Okay, well, I hate it. I hate that our time is up. So, if we did not get to your question, Michelle, we'll get those names, and then we can also just email anybody that had a question.
No, we got all the questions that came through the Q&A, so we're good. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, one of the things when we were preparing for this webinar, that Whitley just said when we were talking about this, is that this is important. This is really important, and what you do with teen girls is important, and it makes an eternal difference. And we're just so grateful for all of you who do this, and I know that we are thankful for all of you. I want to just end our time just praying together and just thanking the Lord for this time together. And thank you, Whitley and Catherine, for just your insight and your wisdom. It's been really, really good. And if you missed some of it, or if you want to share this with someone, we'll be posting it to the LifeWay Women's YouTube channel in the weeks ahead. So you can be looking for that. You can find our other webinars there as well. But let me pray for us before we end. Father, we do just come to you today, so thankful for the opportunity that we can talk about the next generation and how important it is that we pour our lives into them. And Father, that we would be the women of God that you have called us to be, that we can be mentors and guides, that we can be available to them, that we can have conversations, and that we can point girls not to ourselves, but to you and to your word. And so I pray for each one that has joined us today, and I pray that you would bless them in the way that you have called them to minister to girls. And we thank you again in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Thank you, ladies. And our next webinar, we'll give you more information about that. But it's going to be on the subject of prayer, which is a huge topic. So I'm looking forward to having that conversation, and we'll make sure that you get that invitation and invite others to join us too. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time. Bye.